Hello, this is Kyrasis, and in this Blood Death Knight analysis video, we are going to be talking about Umbilicus Eternus, a powerful Mythic plus capstone talent that indirectly saw buffs due to the new tier set bonuses in Season 2 of Dragonflight. However, the main reason I'm making a video on this talent is because Umbilicus Eternus has a lot of weird mechanics and interactions that are not immediately obvious to players. So this will very much be focused on those mechanics and interactions as opposed to any other types of discussion. As such, I'm going to give a brief overview on some of the lesser-known Umbilicus Eternus mechanics, how the patch 10.1 tier set bonuses interact with Umbilicus Eternus, and how everything has affected Umbilicus Eternus going into Season 2 of Dragonflight so far. So, how does Umbilicus Eternus work without any tier set bonus interactions? While the tooltip for Umbilicus Eternus isn't strictly lying to you, it does hide an important detail, the fact that Umbilicus Eternus has a maximum absorbed shield size which is equal to the player's maximum health. That being said, both your uncapped absorbed shield size as well as the Umbilicus Eternus cap are multiplied by any absorbed modifiers the player has. Under normal circumstances, this usually means that they are modified by your versatility, as well as an extra 15% multiplier from Gloom Ward. And, at least in Mythic Plus, it is not too uncommon that you can hit this cap with large enough pulls and with high enough stacks of coagulopathy. If you were wondering if vampiric blood buff affects shield size with its maximum health and healing received benefits, the answer is usually a no. When using vampiric blood, you gain an initial buff for Umbilicus Eternus that is seemingly equal to the duration of your vampiric blood buff that tracks how much blood plague damage you will do over the duration before transforming this amount into an actual absorb shield buff that has the same name. However, while it may appear that vampiric blood and the collection buff for Umbilicus Eternus have the same duration, vampiric blood will always expire before your initial Umbilicus Eternus buff is converted into the actual absorbed shield. So no aspect of vampiric blood will affect Umbilicus Eternus shield size under normal circumstances. Well, this probably no longer works by the time I release this video. Before patch 10.1.5, you used to be able to make a macro to aura cancel the initial Umbilicus Eternus collection buff before it naturally expired, which changed the order of buff expirations and could cause the shield buff to be affected by vampiric blood. Under these circumstances, your Umbilicus Eternus cap would benefit from both the extra maximum health as well as the increased healing received, while your uncapped shield size is affected by only the healing received portion. Again, it is not too uncommon to hit the Umbilicus Eternus cap in Mythic Plus, so it also wasn't that uncommon for this interaction to increase your final shield size by up to 82%. While this can no longer be achieved with aura canceling macros after 10.1.5, the main reason I bring this up is that there are other ways this interaction can occur due to the 10.1 tier set bonuses. So now is a good time to talk about the tier set. I'm going to assume you already understand the gist of how the blood tier set bonus works in patch 10.1. So I'm only going to focus on the two interactions relevant for the purposes of discussing Umbilicus Eternus. 1. How the tier set procs Umbilicus Eternus, and 2. How multiple copies of Umbilicus Eternus interact with each other. Neither of these things work in an obvious way. To start, Umbilicus Eternus procs from the tier set bonus will be 5 seconds long to correspond to the 5-second duration vampiric blood buffs. However, these 5-second Umbilicus Eternus buffs will only proc when vampiric strength procs. And, if you are not aware of this already, vampiric strength procs are currently bugged. How is vampiric strength bugged, you might ask? While manual casts of vampiric blood will always proc vampiric strength, the same is not true for the vampiric blood random procs we get from the tier set bonus. Instead, these procs will not proc vampiric strength if you have a pre-existing vampiric blood buff, but no pre-existing vampiric strength buff. This only happens if you get a Vampiric Blood proc during the later half of a full duration Vampiric Blood manual cast, though it does mean we will be losing around 15% of our potential Vampiric Strength procs due to this bug. And, as we have previously mentioned, no Vampiric Strength buff means no corresponding 5-second Umbilicus Eternus proc. There is one more weird implication to this bug. You see, the Vampiric Blood portion of the tier set procs will never bug out. So, if you get a bugged Vampiric Strength proc, your Vampiric Blood will naturally last longer than your initial Umbilicus Eternus collection buff, which means when bugged Vampiric Strength procs do occur, your Umbilicus Eternus shield will naturally gain the benefit of your Vampiric Blood buff with no player action required, giving you an up to 82% larger shield when your current Umbilicus Eternus collection buff converts into the shield buff. So, at the end of the day, we still get 85% of our Umbilicus Eternus procs as fresh shields, while the remaining procs boost the effectiveness of our shields from manual Vampiric Blood casts. Now, let us move on to refresh behavior. This tier set means that it is possible to have multiple copies of Umbilicus Eternus buffs interacting with each other. Previously, we had talked about how there are two separate Umbilicus Eternus buffs. The first one that is tallying our blood plague damage, as well as the second one which transforms this amount into an absorb shield. First, let us look at the collection buff on its own. If you have just manually casted Vampiric Blood, any pre-existing Umbilicus Eternus collection buff will immediately be converted into a shield to make way for a fresh, full duration Umbilicus Eternus collection buff. However, if you gain Umbilicus Eternus through a Vampiric Blood proc, both the old and new collection buff stack additively, retaining the pre-existing tally of blood plague damage and giving the original buff duration a 5-second longer duration. As for the shield Umbilicus Eternus buff, it does not care where the second Umbilicus Eternus ultimately came from. Any pre-existing shield effect will get completely overridden by a new shield buff. There are two implications from all of this refresh behavior information. First, you don't want to manually cast Vampiric Blood while you have a pre-existing Umbilicus Eternus buff or shield, since we can potentially lose shield throughput, we can lose overall shield duration, or it can cause more overlap between your shields and your Vampiric Blood buffs. Remember, for all intents and purposes, the Umbilicus Eternus shield effect can be treated as a 100% damage reduction defensive cooldown while it is active, and we generally would not want to be stacking any other defensive cooldown effects on top of such a strong defensive effect. Instead, we would prefer to spread out our defensive effects, if at all possible, in our defensive cooldown rotation. Second, there is a rare shield loss interaction that can occur due to the tier set. Since the first implication is mostly straightforward, let us talk about the rare shield loss interaction in a bit more detail, since this is not nearly as obvious. Umbilicus Eternus shield buffs always have a 10-second duration, while the initial Umbilicus Eternus collection buff is always equal in duration to the corresponding Vampiric Blood buff. However, since the tier set Vampiric Blood procs have a 5-second duration, procs that occur within 5 seconds of an Umbilicus Eternus shield buff being created have the potential to override a pre-existing shield if the previous shield still exists by the time the 5-second Umbilicus Eternus collection buff is transformed into a shield buff. This happens very infrequently, and it doesn't have any large impact, but it does result in a small reduction in tier set synergy relative to a world where Umbilicus Eternus shields would stack additively. So, what is the net effect of the tier set bonus? Altogether, it is calculated that the tier set effects account for a minimum of a 30% increase in potential absorbed throughput and uptime for Umbilicus Eternus, though the exact number is higher in large trash pools or when shields are able to last their full durations. Remember, The main benefit of Umbilicus Eternus is that it is effectively a 100% damage reduction cooldown while it is active. So, in a lot of ways, we care a lot more about how long the effect lasts rather than if the entire shield gets used or not. If the shield consistently doesn't get fully used, that just means that we are gaining 10 seconds of a 100% damage reduction cooldown at around a 30% cooldown, which is insanely good for a single talent point and is not even including random Umbilicus Eternus procs you are getting from the tier set bonuses. This number does not include the rare shield loss interaction, though the impact of that bug is relatively minor when compared against all the situations that can lead to a higher increase in effectiveness than what is shown here. Second, the higher item levels we obtained in this season have mostly had a net neutral effect, so it's not much of a factor, but I thought it might be useful to mention that since it was checked. Third, the 10.1 healer nerf through more health and more increased damage resulted in up to a 20% nerf to Umbilicus Eternus effectiveness, since while the Umbilicus Eternus shield cap increases with your maximum health, your uncapped Umbilicus Eternus shields did not see any increase. Still, if your shields would have lasted the full 10 seconds in either case, or if the shield was capped in either case, this healer adjustment would have had no effect on those particular shields, which is why the real-world nerf amount is less than 20% in a lot of situations. Similarly, all of the damage buffs Blood Death Knights have gained in this season so far, up to patch 10.1.5, mean that we also saw an up to 28% buff to Umbilicus Eternus effectiveness due to higher blood plague damage for much the same reasons. So the last two adjustments combined mostly cancel each other out, leaving only a small positive effect. The loss of aura canceling is a lot harder to quantify since even in the highest Blood Death Knight Mythic Plus keys, it was rare that cancel aura shields could be fully absorbed. The tactic likely wasn't even used by most players, and this tick wasn't ever really required for the talent to be good in Mythic Plus in the first place. Even if its functionality wasn't used or useful for a large amount of Blood Death Knights, it is a functionality that we no longer have, so it is still worth listing out here. In any case, Umbilicus Eternus has generally been stronger for Season 2 of Dragonflight relative to its strength in Season 1 of Dragonflight, though this is mostly due to the current tier set interaction the talent enjoys beyond any other reason. In conclusion, we talked about the Umbilicus Eternus shield size calculations, the mechanical interactions of the 10.1 tier set bonus, and the net effect everything has had on Umbilicus Eternus in Season 2 of Dragonflight since patch 10.0. As always, feel free to stop by the channel Discord if you have any feedback, suggestions, or if you would like a Mythic Plus log review. The Discord information as well as my Discord contact information is in the video description below. Let me know what you think about these mechanics in the comments below, and if you want to make it easier for other people to find this content, feel free to upvote the video and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, good luck and have fun.